What's up, guys? Running it back with another replay. I'm so used to hearing Valkia giving speeches on my side, but I am not helming the Forces of Chaos for a change. Although usually it is the Khorne Mono God faction, but Valkia is here nonetheless, ready to party. I'm helming the Vampire Counts today with some Blood Knights and the Red Duke being the centerpieces of my army. While I've got some Graveguard over here, the Great Weapon variant and the Stearnsmen, Corpse Carts, Zombies, Spears, all the typical stuff you'll see in this matchup. Moving up onto this number 2 objective, gonna try and hold this against the Forces of Chaos, who have come in with a pretty heavy kite build. I mean, Horse Masters and some Horsemen. Certainly gonna be able to put quite a hammering on my forces if I'm not careful. Although throwing against zombies, maybe not the best use of their javelins here. Getting in on the Blood Knights now, taking a couple casualties here, but gonna position them so that they aren't getting shot up too terribly. They are going to take a lot of damage, but they do have shields and Flag of the Blood Keep, making them a little more resistant. And up here, the Red Duke, going to take an early duel with Valkia. Cycle charging here and doing some decent damage. Elseith has been popped on her. She does counter with the Demon Shield finally there, but not before she takes a decent amount of damage. But that's not going to matter too much to my opponent because he does have the Chaos Sorcerer back here and Fleshy Abundance in the pocket, as you would expect. Going to be keeping Valkia nice and healthy. And man, if Valkia could get healed on the Khorne roster, she would be an absolute nightmare, truly unstoppable, but alas, the Warriors of Chaos, whoa, weird effects going on, very typical Warhammer moment, but being on the Warriors of Chaos faction, not synergizing as well with some of the units. You know, Khorne has some weak points that Warriors of Chaos cover up, but also, by that same token, don't quite have the same punching power on their infantry and durability on infantry. You know, the Chaos Warriors do have a little bit more effective, like, stat spreads than the Khorne Warriors of Chaos, but lacking any resistance to spells can be a bit painful for these guys. They aren't going to be quite as happy going in here against the Vampire Counts, who are well known for having pretty destructive magic spells. Although, this time around, I'm not really going for that style. No Winds of Death here. Just lots of heals, Vangeist, or not Vangeist, but Van Hel's. Very underrated spell, quite honestly. Very cheap for what it does. Pretty good duration on it, almost 30 seconds. And gives a pretty substantial buff to your army, you know. I mean, 24 melee attack is no joke, so. Gonna use the Blood Knights here. They got a nice heal. They're gonna fight against these aspiring champions, hammering in, doing a little bit of chip damage to these guys.
One of your units
while the Fellbats do force back the Skirmisher Corps here. Very nice trade for me. Forcing a lot of ammo out of these guys, where they're not throwing against the Blood Knights or the Cairn Wraiths. And my opponent just can't quite overwhelm me on the number 1 objective here. Playing split against the Vampire Counts is a good idea, but it's a very bad idea to do it in this particular manner. I've made this mistake so many times against Vampire Counts, and can speak from experience pretty confidently. You do not want to split your forces up into one large blob that's taking the fight against the Corpse Carts and the infantry, while you've got another smaller and mostly skirmisher-focused force trying to deal with capping the back objective. It's a bit of a trap. It's very difficult to accomplish, just because of Vampire Counts are pretty quick, quite honestly. I mean, they've got Vargeist, Blood Knights, Cairn Wraiths are very quick for an infantry-sized unit, and then the survivability of Corpse Carts and the like can make it very difficult to win these grinds. You can see not a lot of damage taken in this fight over here, but the Marauders of Khorne with dual weapons and the Chaos Warriors here, they're pretty much done. They've taken significant casualties from the Graveguard and Stearnsmen here. Valkia is finally going to get in here and try and deal with this Corpse Cart, But the Sternsmen are here. Sternsmen do have the bonus versus infantry and pretty good combat stats. They don't love fighting Valkia, but they can acquit themselves competently against her, just because their melee attack does mitigate a lot of the power from her melee attack stat. So they're going to do some pretty good work here, just keeping her locked in place as well, so she can't go and chase down the Red Duke, who I was running with for quite a while. You might have seen him just fleeing for his life from the very scary combat abilities that Valkia provides. Not a lot of value on this guy, but the healing has been incredibly important, because the Blood Knights have just been getting focused down by these javelins, man. And luckily, the ammo for these guys is about out, and maybe I'll be able to start doing something with them. They've been pretty locked up trying to hold this back point. My opponent did almost accomplish the back cap with the Aspiring Champions and Hounds here, but some more Cairn Wraiths coming in and helping deal with the Hounds here. Gonna jump on this other one and deal with that Hound unit shortly. And just very much competently winning this infantry grind back here. The Chaos Warriors and Marauders. Chaos Knights got very caught up in this blob and did a lot of damage, but got countercharged by the Vargeist here. Been doing some decent damage to them, while the Graveguard are just slowly working down some of the other targets here, and the Tithe and the Zombies just very ably dying for their Undead Masters, and finally getting some revenge on these Horse Masters, smacking out here on the edge, ripping this unit apart with the Blood Knights, and they're going to start tearing through this other Marauder Horsemaster. These guys don't have a lot of health left, but 36 models on this Blood Knight unit is nothing to sneeze at. These guys just hit so hard against large targets. And, you know, Horsemasters, 50 armor is not quite enough to, even though these guys don't have AP, it's not enough to mitigate most of their weapon damage, and 1,000 value on these guys, but really not as impactful as you would like to see. Losing the objective yet again, but just barely holding on to it with the Cairn Wraiths here. Dropping some zombies on top of the Aspiring Champions to provide a little bit of buffering for these Cairn Wraiths, who are mostly, I'm trying to maneuver them around to deal with this tattered Chaos Warrior, which they are thankfully doing. More graphical goodness. I'm not sure what's causing that. But Red Duke coming in here. Also, he's pretty good against units like this. You know, Aspiring Champions, they're pretty good against a lot of stuff, but not very good against armored targets. The Red Duke's got enough armor and good enough melee attack to actually poke through these guys pretty effectively. Certainly going to do good work with the Cryptars now, who have just massive AP. And these guys are just trapped up by way too much at this point. Not going to be able to win this fight. They could win all of these fights one at a time, probably, but being surrounded like this, they're just not going to be able to handle that. Back here, Valkia, man, getting a lot of heals and getting decent value, but not finding the right targets to fight. Just trying desperately to kill this Corpse Cart, but Graveguard with great weapons, providing enough power, and the Sternsmen taking a fat charge from these Chaos Knights, but that's not too bad because they do have the expert charge defense, so pretty nice for me. Holding against these guys and just punching back with the Vargeist now. These Vargeists gearing up for a good rear charge, or thinking about going after Marauders and the Sorcerer. They are going to decide at first to go for the Sorcerer, but I'd end up taking the charge against the Marauders just to kill the chaff. Doing fat damage. These things are such a good unit. I think that they're way better to bring than Cryptars, honestly. Cryptars do provide cap weight, and they're nice to have in a pinch. It's certainly worth bringing a couple, but I am not a huge fan of relying on them. You see them so often against vampire counts, and I think the best thing about them is their regeneration and poison. Honestly, they've got okay leadership as well, but their stats are kind of poor for a monstrous infantry unit when you really get down to brass tacks about it. They have a weakness to fire, they have pretty low weapon strength, low melee defense. Weapon or melee attack is pretty decent, and okay speed. So they're good in that regard. I just don't find them to be as powerful as a lot of other Counts players do. I really do prefer a more mobile count style than just tarp hitting on 2 objectives. I am kind of going for that style here, but that's mostly because great weapons are absolutely obscene in this matchup, and I know that, so I'm trying to take account and advantage of it. Swarming some halberds out here, as you might have seen. They're just surrounded by the Tithe, managed to get behind them and lock them in place, while the Cairn Wraiths and Vargeist and Crypt Horrors, slowing them down to 15 speed. They're not going anywhere. Very nice engagement for me, and a fantastic opportunity. I am losing this objective, unfortunately. It is capped by the aspiring champions here. They did start routing. I'm not sure why I stopped pursuing them, but not to worry at the end of the day. I do have a pretty substantial lead. And my opponent's number 3 objective is pretty weak right now, honestly. I've got quite a few units out here. Very handily winning these infantry engagements, and the Dire Pack are coming in. They're going to help push back the Horsemaster and Horseman spam, and that's going to be a nice situation for me. The Blood Knights, they've been rolling around. They've been doing a little bit of work, just fighting a variety of targets. Mortis Engine dealing with the aspiring champions here, and finally cleaning up the last of my opponent's units on this back objective. I don't have a lot here, but what I do have is Sternsman and 2 Graveguard Great Weapon units, which is going to be more than enough to handle whatever else comes out from my opponent. Which, looking at it, it's going to be 2 Marauders of Khorne, which I don't think are bad in this matchup, but they're just a little squishy. You know, they got 530 value on this guy, and 434, but a ton of kills on this one, and that's great, but they just aren't going to be able to work through the great weapons here. Although, to be quite honest, there's really just not a lot on the Warriors of Chaos roster in terms of infantry that can go toe-to-toe with the great weapon Graveguard, which is why I think bringing them is so important. And these guys, you know, they've got plenty of room for before their healing cap comes up. And Sternsmen, they are healing capped, but 2,400 value on them. Absolutely crazy. 2,500 on these guys. These guys, a little bit less. They weren't able to fully pile into combat, but 700 is certainly not bad. Vargeist flying above with 1,500 value, and it's just looking really good for me. The caster did get caught by the Blood Knights. 1,900 value on these guys. It took them a while, but they finally paid for themselves, and they're here in the 4th quarter, which is going to pay huge dividends. Finally dealing with the aspiring champions. The Mortis Engine doing a lot of that damage, giving the Red Duke an opportunity to come in here and just snipe out single targets on these guys. Not crazy value on them, only up to about 1,000. But he is here and can, oh, it's off of him. He's the one who's having all these weird graphical effects, but he's pretty good at killing aspiring champions. He's very good at sniping Festus and some of the other Warrior of Chaos lords. Just, you know, my opponent brought Valkia. Valkia is pretty crazy. Can't fight her at all with the Red Duke, really. If he was on the Dragon, he might be able to. It's still not a great trade, honestly, but it would be a little more doable in that circumstance. Blood Knights buffering with the shields, you know, taking a little bit of damage, but they're still decently healthy. I mean, 35 models, going down to 34, 2,600 HP, and the Fellbats are going to continue the pursuit while they just lance into the rear of this Marauder unit. Vargeist diving in on top of the other Marauder unit, and these guys are just getting pounded by all of this stopping power from the vampire counts here. And the values do look even, but that is always very misleading against counts. I mean, I've probably gotten 5, maybe even 6,000 gold value in healing so far this game. I mean, the Red Duke has just been flying around. He's dropped a lot of heals on those Blood Knights, who, as you saw, were healing capped. And, yeah, it's looking really nice for me. Cairn Wraiths and everything stacked up on top of the Mortis Engine, leeching down the Forsaken here. Hounds losing badly to the Sternsmen. Just charging flat into them was a very big mistake. These guys eat hounds for breakfast. I mean, they've got way too much armor, and, I mean, they got a bonus versus infantry, and Hounds just don't have any melee defense. I mean, 17 is porous. Zombies do a good job of countering Hounds as well, honestly. But GG's to my opponent. I think, unfortunately for him, just not able to kill the Blood Knights with the skirmishers in the early game. While I did feed tons of value to those guys, they don't have anything to do once their ammo's used up. And the grind fight just went massively in my favor, honestly. The Warriors, none of the Warriors and Marauders really paying for themselves. Just suffering horribly. The Chaos Knights, they would have been good to pressure that back objective. I think my opponent could have pushed the lane and left most of my blob to just kind of flail about on that number 2 objective if he really wanted to. He just kind of fell into the trap that you see a lot of players do against vampire counts. And just trying to do too much at once against them. Vampire counts are very bad if you focus them down effectively, or just try to outposition them. If you try and play into a blob fight against them, you are going to lose if you do not kill the corpse cards, because these things just provide insane healing value. It's a pretty small heal. In the grand scheme of things, it isn't that great, but being able... It stacks on top of the cast heals, and on top of... I think Mortis Engine even stacks on top of it as well, so it can be really nice for you. And very difficult to kill all of this chaff when it's just getting melee buffs and vigor reduction. The small heal over time is certainly enough to get stuff on a healing cap or close to it. And then there's just a lot of regeneration on this roster, you know? I mean, you've got Crypt Horrors that have it. Vargeist have the Hunger, so not the same thing, but it does help when they're on top of the Lodestones here. Gives them a very nice extra bit of healing. And it just makes them a little bit too difficult to take in a straight-up fight. So, I think the best thing would have been to sit back and snipe down the corpse carts with the Marauder Horsemasters. They're very accurate, and he could have kept them very safe from my attacks. I did have a decent amount of mobility, but nothing too insane. You know, Blood Knights and Vargeist and Crypt Horrors, you know, they're very good at diving a backline, don't get me wrong. But against focused missile fire and fighting stuff like Chaos Knights, I don't think I would have been able to win that grind at the end of the day. So I would have had to sit in my blob and play a lot more conservatively than I needed to